The transport ship Meridian drifted through the asteroid belt like a dying whale, its hull by countless micro-impacts, and its engines barely maintaining life support. Commander Sarah pressed her face against the observation deck's reinforced window, watching the debris field that had once been the mining colony of 442 be slowly tumble past in the void. 3 days since the distress signal went dark, she murmured to herself, her breath fogging the cold glass. Behind her, the rescue team prepared their equipment with practiced efficiency, but could feel the weight of their doubt. Everyone knew what happened to colonies that went silent in the outer rim. Pirates, system failures, or worse, the void crawlers that had been pushing into human space for the past 5 years. "Commander," called Lieutenant from the comm station, his voice tight with strain. "We're picking up something on long-range sensors. It's not on any star charts." Turned from the window, her military training kicking in despite the exhaustion that had settled into her bones after 18 months of rescue missions that turned into body recovery operations. What kind of something? Massive, organic signatures, but the computer can't classify them. It's like nothing in our database. Fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up a three-dimensional representation of local space. A pulsing red dot appeared roughly 50,000 kilometers from their position, nestled between two large asteroids. Doctor the teams leaned over shoulder to study the readings. His face went pale beneath his graying beard. "These energy patterns? They're not random. There's intelligence behind this, but the scale is impossible. Whatever's generating this signal would have to be the size of a small moon." Felt a familiar chill run down her spine. In her 23 years of service, she had learned to trust that feeling. It had kept her alive through the conflict and the first void crawler encounters. "All stop. Passive sensors only. I want to know what we're dealing with before we announce our presence." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems and the occasional beep from the sensor array. Outside, the stars watched with cold indifference as the Meridian coasted through the darkness, its crew holding their collective breath. "Commander," whispered Ensign Park from the tactical station, her young voice barely audible. "I'm reading multiple smaller contacts moving around the large signature. They're coming this way." On the main screen, dozens of tiny lights began to separate from the larger mass, moving with purpose and intelligence through the asteroid field. As they drew closer, the ship's sensors began to resolve their shapes, sleek, serpentine forms that seemed to flow through space like swimming creatures. "Are those ships?" asked, his voice cracking slightly. Doctor's instruments were going wild, registering energy signatures unlike anything in human databases. "The propulsion system is completely unknown. No exhaust signatures, no gravitational distortions. It's as if they're moving through space-time itself." Gripped the command chair's armrests, her knuckles white. "Red alert. Shields up, weapons charged, but do not target. Whatever these things are, they haven't shown hostile intent yet." The approaching vessels, if they were vessels, moved with an organic grace that conventional physics. As they drew within visual range, the crew of the Meridian saw that they resembled enormous dragons, their scales gleaming with an inner light that shifted through the spectrum from deep purple to brilliant gold. Each creature was easily 200 meters long, with wing-like appendages that seemed to catch and manipulate stellar radiation. "My God," breathed Doctor, "they're beautiful." The lead creature, Dragon's mind supplied despite the impossibility of it, came to a stop just outside the ship's weapon range. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, impossibly, a voice filled the bridge, speaking directly into their minds with a clarity that made several crew members gasp. "Small metal swimmers, why do you drift here in the graveyard of dreams?" Forced herself to remain calm, though her heart was racing. First contact protocols had never covered telepathic space dragons. "This is Commander Sarah of the Earth Federation vessel Meridian. We received a distress signal from a human colony in this system." A sound that might have been laughter rippled through their consciousness. "Humans? Yes, we know of your kind. Brief candles that burn so brightly before guttering out. The settlement you seek is gone, consumed by the endless hunger 3 rotations past." "The endless hunger?" Doctor leaned forward eagerly, his scientific curiosity overriding his caution. "Are you referring to what we call the void crawlers?" The dragon's mental voice grew heavy with ancient sorrow. "Many names for the same darkness. They are the antithesis of life, the unmaking of all that is." For 10 million years, the Eternal Mother has stood guard against their advance, but now. The creature's thoughts trailed off, and felt a wave of grief so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Around her, she saw her crew struggling with the same emotional overflow. Now what? She managed to ask. Now she sleeps the deep sleep, and we, her children, are too weak to wake her. The barriers fail. The hunger spreads. Soon all the young species will fall, and the galaxy will know only silence. Lieutenant spoke up, his voice shaky but determined. What if we helped? Humans are good at waking things up. The dragon's attention turned to him, and felt the weight of an intelligence vast beyond human comprehension studying her communications officer. You are brave, small one, but you do not understand. The mother is not merely sleeping. She hovers at the threshold between existence and void, poisoned by the touch of the endless hunger. To wake her improperly would mean her death and the death of all hope. But it's possible, pressed. There's a way. Perhaps. There are legends among our kind of the first awakening, when the mother was roused from her initial slumber by the sacrifice of her first children. But the ritual requires more than mere will. It demands the spark of creation itself, the fire that burns in the hearts of young races before it dims with age and cynicism. Doctor was frantically taking notes on his portable tablet. Commander, the implications here are staggering. We're talking about a galactic-scale ecosystem, with these beings as some kind of immune system against entropic forces. Nodded, but her mind was already moving to practical considerations. How many of your people are left? Few, so few. The youngest among us is older than your species' first cities. We have forgotten how to hope, how to dream of tomorrow instead of mourning yesterday. Then you need us, said simply. Not because we're powerful or wise, but because we're young enough to believe impossible things can be accomplished. The dragon's mental presence shifted and felt something that might have been surprise. You would risk your lives for beings you have never met, for a mother who is not your own. That's what humans do, replied, thinking of all the rescue missions she had led, all the desperate gambles that had somehow paid off. We help. It's not always smart, and it doesn't always work, but we try. A long silence stretched across the void, broken only by the distant hum of the ship's systems. Then, slowly, the dragon began to turn back toward the larger mass hidden among the asteroids. Follow if you dare, but know that the path ahead leads either to salvation or to a darkness deeper than the void between stars. The mother's resting place is protected by trials that have claimed the lives of heroes greater than any your young species has produced. Understood, said, settling back into her command chair. Plot a course to follow our new friend. All departments prepare for the unknown. As the Meridian changed course to follow the space dragons deeper into the asteroid field, couldn't shake the feeling that she was leading her crew not just into danger, but into legend. The stakes were beyond anything humanity had ever faced. The survival of an entire galaxy hung in the balance. But as she watched the graceful forms of the dragons swimming through space ahead of them, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years of endless rescue missions and hopeless battles. Genuine hope. Behind them, invisible but growing stronger with each passing hour, the scouts of the endless hunger detected the movement and began their own approach. The race to save or doom the galaxy had begun, and at its center lay a sleeping goddess whose dreams shaped the fate of countless worlds. The Meridian pressed on into the unknown, carrying with it the stubborn, reckless hope of humanity into the dark places between the stars. The journey to the mother's resting place took 6 hours through an increasingly bizarre landscape of floating crystal formations and gravitational anomalies that known physics. Instruments registered energy readings that belonged more in the core of a star than in open space, while Navigator fought to keep the Meridian on course through spatial distortions that seemed to bend reality itself. It's like flying through a living equation, muttered, sweat beading on her forehead as she compensated for another impossible gravity well. The math keeps changing even as I calculate it. The dragons guided them through passages between crystalline structures the size of space stations, each one pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. Found herself wondering if they were flying through the arteries of some unimaginably vast organism. You are not far wrong in your thoughts, Commander, came the voice of their guide, who had identified himself as last singer of the dying song. The mother's body spans dimensions. What you see here are merely the shadows cast by her true form into your limited reality. How is she alive if she's this large? Doctor asked aloud, his scientific mind struggling with concepts that had no precedent. Life and death have different meanings when you exist across multiple planes of existence. The mother dreams, and her dreams become reality. But dreams can become nightmares when touched by the endless hunger's influence. As if summoned by the mention of their enemy, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Lieutenant's hands flew across his console, pulling up tactical displays that showed dozens of new contacts emerging from the void behind them. Commander, we have pursuit, multiple bogies moving fast and closing distance. Configuration matches void crawler attack patterns from previous encounters. Felt her blood turn to ice. The void crawlers were nightmare creatures that seemed to be made of living darkness, capable of phasing through normal matter and feeding on life force itself. Standard human weapons were largely ineffective against them, and they reproduced by converting their victims into more of their kind. How many? She asked, though she dreaded the answer. 47 confirmed contacts, with more emerging every second. They must have been following us since we entered the system. His mental voice carried new urgency. The hunger has found us. We must reach the mother's chamber quickly or all is lost. Your metal shell cannot stand against their numbers. Made a decision that would have gotten her court-martialed under normal circumstances. All power to engines, emergency acceleration, forget about structural stress limits. The Meridian lurched forward, pressing its crew deep into their seats as the ship strained against forces that threatened to tear it apart. Behind them, the void crawlers gave pursuit, their organic ships writhing through space like swimming serpents of pure malevolence. They're gaining, shouted over the groaning of the ship's hull. Impact in 4 minutes. But ahead of them, something miraculous was happening. The remaining dragons were forming a defensive formation, their bodies beginning to glow with an inner fire that made the space around them shimmer with heat distortions. We will buy you time, transmitted, his mental voice heavy with resolve. The sacrifice song has not been sung in, but we remember the words. Watched in awe and horror as the majestic creatures turned to face the approaching darkness. Their bodies blazed brighter, and she realized they were literally burning themselves up, converting their life force into pure energy. No, she shouted, there has to be another way. There is no other way for us, brave commander. We are the guardians who failed in our duty. This is our atonement. The first wave of void crawlers hit the dragon formation, and space itself seemed to scream. The creatures of darkness recoiled from the blazing light, their forms wavering and dissolving where the dragon fire touched them. But there were so many of them, and so few defenders left. One by one, the dragons fell, their bodies burning out like dying stars as they held the line. Was among the last, his massive form wreathed in golden flames that pushed back the darkness for precious moments. Tell the mother, tell her that her children, remembered. His voice faded as his light gutted out, leaving only empty space and the howling mental static of the approaching void crawlers. But his sacrifice had bought them enough time. Ahead, the asteroid field opened into a vast hollow space, and at its center hung something that description. It was vaguely humanoid in shape, but made of living starlight and cosmic energy, easily the size of Earth's moon. The mother slept, her chest rising and falling with breaths that took centuries to complete. My God, whispered Doctor, she's beautiful. The sleeping figure was indeed magnificent, her hair flowing like solar wind, her skin glowing with the soft radiance of a healthy star. But could see the corruption spreading through that celestial form like a cancer, dark veins that pulsed with malevolent energy, the touch of the endless hunger slowly poisoning her dreams. How do we wake something like that? Ensign Park asked, her voice barely audible. Before anyone could answer, a new voice filled their minds, young and bright and desperate. It came from a small figure floating near the mother's vast hand. A dragon child, no larger than the Meridian itself, her scales shimmering between silver and pearl. Please, metal swimmers, you must help. The poison spreads faster now that the guardians have fallen. Soon it will reach her heart, and then all hope dies with her. Didn't hesitate. Prepare the shuttles, we're going aboard. Commander, Doctor protested, the radiation levels alone would kill us in minutes. I can protect you, the little dragon said, swimming closer to their ship. My name is Last Daughter of the Final Clutch. I have been waiting here for someone brave enough to try the awakening ritual. What does the ritual require? asked as she stood up from her command chair. Three things: a vessel of pure intention, a sacrifice freely given, and the spark of mortal courage that burns in the face of impossible odds. You possess all three, but the cost. What cost? To wake the mother properly, one must enter her dreams and burn away the nightmare that holds her captive. But dreams are reality for beings like her. If you fail, you will not simply die, you will never have existed. Looked around at her crew, seeing the fear and determination warring in their faces. Behind them, the void crawlers were already beginning to enter the hollow space, their dark forms spreading like an infection across the stars. I'll go alone, she decided. No, the voice came from Sergeant Torres, her security chief and oldest friend. If you're doing this insane thing, you're not doing it alone. Marines don't leave their officers behind. Doctor stepped forward as well. You'll need someone who understands the biology involved. I'm coming too. One by one, her entire crew volunteered, even young Ensign Park, who was barely out of the academy. Felt her throat tighten with emotion. This was what made humans special, not their technology or their intelligence, but their ability to stand together in the face of annihilation. You are strange creatures, observed. Your lives are brief as mayfly dances, yet you burn with such intensity. Perhaps that is exactly what is needed. The little dragon extended her consciousness around the meridian, creating a protective bubble of energy that would allow them to approach the mother safely. As they drew closer to the sleeping goddess, could see the corruption more clearly, writhing tendrils of darkness that seemed to whisper of despair and ending. The poison is getting worse, Doctor observed, his instruments detecting massive spikes in negative energy. How long does the awakening ritual take? As long as it takes to fight a war inside the mother's subconscious, replied grimly. Her dreams have become a battlefield between creation and destruction. You must find the core of her identity and burn away the nightmares that bind her. And if we fail, then the galaxy dies and the endless hunger spreads to consume all other realities. But I do not think you will fail, strange fire-bearers. You have something my people lost long ago, the ability to hope for miracles. As the meridian settled into a stable orbit around the mother's vast hand, gathered her team in the shuttle bay. Outside, they could see the void crawlers massing for their final assault, their numbers now in the thousands. This is it, she told her crew. The moment when everything changes. We go in there, we save a goddess, and we tell the universe that humanity doesn't give up, ever. They suited up in the ship's most advanced environmental gear, though suspected conventional protection would be useless where they were going. As they prepared to disembark, his young voice filled their minds one last time. Remember, in her dreams, belief becomes reality. Think of what you fight for, not what you fear, and whatever happens, do not let go of each other. The shuttle launched toward the mother's temple, carrying 23 humans into the dreams of a sleeping goddess, while behind them the forces of entropy gathered like a storm of living darkness. The fate of countless worlds now rested in the hands of a species barely 200,000 years old. Time was running out, and the real battle was about to begin. The transition from physical reality into the mother's dreamscape was like diving from a sunlit beach into the deepest ocean trench. Felt her consciousness stretch and compress simultaneously as guided them through layers of sleeping thought that had accumulated over millions of years. When awareness returned, she found herself standing in a vast garden that stretched beyond the horizon, filled with flowering trees that sang in harmonious chords and streams that flowed upward into cloudy skies painted in impossible colors. Her crew materialized around her, their forms solid but somehow more vivid than they had been in the waking world. "Where are we?" Ensign Park asked, her voice filled with wonder as she touched a nearby flower that chimed like a silver bell at her approach. "The mother's memory of the first world," Doctor said softly, his scientific mind somehow able to process what they were experiencing. "This is what the universe looked like when she was young, before the endless hunger began its war against creation." But even as he spoke, they could see the corruption spreading through this paradise. Dark veins cracked across the singing trees, their music turning to discordant wails. The upward-flowing streams began to run backward, carrying with them the detritus of dead worlds. "You must hurry," his voice reached them from somewhere beyond the dreamscape. "The poison spreads faster now that she knows strangers walk in her mind. The nightmare will try to turn her dreams against you." As if summoned by her words, shadows began to move between the dying trees. They took the form of things from humanity's darkest fears. Faceless soldiers, burning cities, the screaming faces of everyone they had failed to save during their careers in the Outer Rim. "Don't look at them," commanded, remembering warning about belief becoming reality. "They're just echoes. Focus on what we came here to do." But it was easier said than done. Sergeant Torres stumbled as a shadow in the shape of his dead daughter reached toward him with pleading eyes. Doctor cried out as he saw his research station burning, all his life's work turning to ash and smoke. "Remember what you fight for," shouted, grabbing Torres by the shoulder and pulling him forward. "Not what you fear." They pressed deeper into the dreamscape, following a path of silver light that had shown them. The garden gave way to other memories, star nurseries where the mother had shepherded the birth of new sons, crystal palaces where she had hosted the first councils of young species, battlefields where she had fought the initial incursions of the endless hunger. Each memory was more corrupted than the last, the beautiful scenes twisted into nightmarish parodies of themselves. In one, they saw the mother as a younger being, dancing among newborn galaxies with companions who looked like living constellations. But the darkness had infected this memory too, turning her dance partners into writhing masses of tentacles and screaming void. "How long has she been fighting this war?" Lieutenant asked, his face pale as they witnessed battle after battle, defeat after defeat. "Long enough to forget that winning was possible," realized. "That's the real poison, not just the corruption, but the despair that comes with fighting alone for so long." They climbed through layers of dreams that grew progressively darker, until they reached what could only be the mother's current nightmare. Here, the landscape was a wasteland of crystallized screams, where the remains of dead civilizations jutted from blood-red sand like broken teeth. In the distance, a massive structure rose from the desolation, a fortress of living bone and shadow where something waited with patient malevolence. "The heart of despair," Doctor breathed, reading the structure's purpose in the twisted mathematics that governed this realm. "It's a construct made from every failure, every loss she's experienced. The endless hunger uses it to amplify her guilt and convince her that creation itself is futile." As they approached the fortress, the very air began to thicken with oppressive thoughts. Felt waves of crushing hopelessness washing over her, the certainty that they were too small, too weak, too brief to matter in the cosmic scale of things. "Why struggle against the inevitable?" A voice whispered from the walls themselves. "You have seen the extent of her failure. Worlds beyond counting have fallen while she slept. What difference can 23 mayflies make against the entropy of eternity?" Several of her crew members stopped walking, their shoulders slumping as the despair took hold. Felt it too, the seductive pull of giving up, of accepting that some fights were too big for mortals to win. But then she remembered something from her childhood, a story her grandmother had told her about humanity's first steps into space. How the engineers and astronauts had looked at the impossibility of reaching the moon and decided to try anyway, not because they knew they would succeed, but because the attempt itself was worth making. "Listen to me," she said, turning to address her crew with renewed determination. "That voice is right about one thing: we are small. We're mayflies in the cosmic scale. But you know what mayflies do? They live, they dance, they love, they create new life even knowing they'll die. And that's not a weakness, it's the strongest thing in the universe." She started walking again, and slowly, one by one, her crew followed. "The endless hunger fears us because we represent something it can never understand. We don't fight because we know we'll win. We fight because the fight itself has meaning." The fortress gates loomed before them, carved with scenes of galactic apocalypse and the death of stars. But as approached, she felt something unexpected, not fear but anger. Pure, righteous fury at the thing that had poisoned a goddess's dreams and convinced her that creation wasn't worth defending. "Open up," she shouted at the gates, her voice carrying across the nightmare landscape. "I'm Commander Sarah of the Earth Federation, and I'm here to tell you that you're wrong." The gates exploded inward, unable to withstand the force of such absolute conviction. Beyond lay a throne room where the heart of despair waited, a writhing mass of shadow and negative space that hurt to look at directly. It spoke with the voices of every failure, every loss, every moment of doubt the mother had ever experienced. "You dare to challenge eons of truth, little flame? I am the sum of every defeat, every life that could not be saved. I am the certainty that all effort is meaningless in the face of entropy's triumph." "You're wrong," said simply, walking forward despite the psychic pressure that threatened to crush her mind. "Yes, people die. Yes, worlds fall. But that doesn't make the lives unlived, the battles unfought, the love unexpressed. It makes them precious." Around her, her crew began to spread out, each of them finding their own voice in this cosmic argument. Doctor spoke of discoveries made despite knowing they would be forgotten. Tours talked about comrades saved even when the war was lost. Shared stories of messages delivered across impossible distances, carrying hope between the stars. Lies, the heart hissed, its form writhing more violently. Pretty words to mask the futility of your existence. "Then explain this," said, pulling out her sidearm and pointing it directly at the creature's core. "If nothing matters, if all effort is meaningless, then why are you here? Why do you exist at all? The endless hunger wouldn't need you if hope was really dead." For the first time in eons, the heart of despair hesitated. In that moment of uncertainty, felt the mother's attention turned toward them, a vast consciousness beginning to stir as it sensed something it had forgotten. Who dares to dream of defiance in my deepest nightmare?" The mother's voice was like the movement of continents, ancient beyond measure but touched now with the faintest spark of curiosity. "Just some humans, your majesty," called out, never taking her eyes off the weakening heart. "We're here to remind you that the war isn't over. There are still people out there worth fighting for." The heart made one last desperate attempt to reassert its hold, flooding the throne room with images of cosmic horror and inevitable defeat. But her crew stood firm, their small but brilliant flames of humanity burning steady against the darkness. And slowly, impossibly, the mother began to wake up. Light flooded the dreamscape as her consciousness fully engaged for the first time in. The heart of despair shrieked as it began to dissolve, its hold broken by the simple refusal of 23 mortals to accept despair as truth. I remember," the mother said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I remember why I chose to fight. Not because victory was certain, but because the alternative was unthinkable." The nightmare landscape began to transform back into the garden they had first seen, but now it was alive with new growth, vibrant with possibilities that hadn't existed before. The mother's form materialized before them, no longer the sleeping giant they had seen in space, but a being of human scale, radiant with renewed purpose. "Thank you," she said simply, and in those two words heard the gratitude of countless worlds. "I had forgotten that hope is not about knowing the future, but about believing it can be better than the past." The transition back to normal space was gentler this time, like surfacing slowly from a deep, peaceful sleep. Found herself back on the bridge of the meridian, watching through the viewports as the mother's physical form began to stir, her vast body pulsing with healthy starlight. Outside, the approaching void crawlers stopped their advance, their forms wavering as their connection to despair was severed. One by one, they began to dissolve back into the quantum foam from which they had emerged, unable to exist in a universe where hope had been rekindled. "The endless hunger is not destroyed," warned them, her young voice bright with joy but touched with caution. "It retreats now to lick its wounds, but it will return when the galaxy forgets this lesson." "Then we'll make sure the galaxy remembers," said firmly. "Humans are good at telling stories. We'll spread the word that despair is not inevitable, that as long as someone is willing to fight for tomorrow, creation will endure." The mother's voice filled their minds one last time, warm with affection and bright with renewed determination. "Go well, brave little flames. Carry your light to the dark places, and know that wherever hope burns, I will be watching." As the Meridian prepared to begin its journey back to human space, looked around at her crew. They had entered this mission as a simple rescue operation and emerged as participants in something cosmic. But more importantly, they had proven that size didn't matter, that age didn't matter, that the young and small and brief could still change the universe. "Set course for home," she ordered. "We have a galaxy to inspire." Behind them, the mother rose from her ancient slumber, her form blazing like a newborn star as she prepared to resume her eternal vigil. The war against entropy would continue, but it would no longer be a hopeless struggle. Humanity had reminded the universe that as long as someone cared enough to fight, the light would never go out. And in the vast garden of her restored dreams, the mother smiled, knowing that she was no longer alone in the darkness between the stars.